Before you listen, if you enjoyed the stories and want to hear more, then please consider subscribing. Most of you listening aren't subscribed, so please take this time to subscribe. Turn on notifications so you'll never miss a story and be the first to hear. You'll also be supporting me. Thank you. I was thrilled when my coworker James from the office asked me out on a date. We'd been flirting a little bit around the water cooler and exchanged some banter during meetings, so I was excited when he finally worked up the courage to ask me to dinner. We agreed to try out this new upscale restaurant downtown that had just opened up and was getting rave reviews. The day of the big date, I spent way too much time agonizing over what to wear. I must have tried on 10 different outfits, soliciting my roommate's opinion on each one. Should I go casual with jeans or dress it up with a cocktail dress? I finally settled on a flirty black wrap dress and heels. Dressy enough for a nice restaurant, but not over the top. I finished off the look by curling my hair and doing my makeup with extra care. James had made reservations at 7 p.m., so I planned to arrive right on time. I got to the restaurant and gave his name, and the hostess led me to a table where James was already seated. He looked handsome in a sport coat and buttoned down, but barely looked up from his phone when I arrived. So much for standing up when your date approaches the table. I greeted James with a friendly hello and smile as I sat down across from him. He mumbled a quick hi back before returning to whatever he was looking at on his phone screen. Well, this was an awkward start. I tried to break the silence with some light small talk about how our week at work had been, but I could barely get more than a one-word response out of him. After a few painful minutes of attempting conversation, the waiter arrived to take our drink order. I asked what cocktails or wines they recommended. James cut me off and barked that he would have the bourbon, never even glancing up at the waiter. That was a little rude. When the waiter turned to me, I made sure to give him my order with extra politeness and manners to try to make up for James' behavior. Once we had our drinks in hand, I tried yet again to get some conversation flowing. I asked James if he had been to this restaurant before or what made him choose it for our date spot. He shrugged and said he hadn't been here, but had read about it somewhere. Well, that was the most words he had strung together, so I considered it progress. Our server returned to take our dinner order. When he asked if we had any questions, I decided to try to get James engaged by asking the waiter what dish he recommended since everything sounded delicious. Before he could even answer, James cut in to bluntly rattle off what he wanted, barely even making eye contact with the poor waiter. Okay, the brusqueness was starting to get really rude at this point. James clearly had no interest in chatting with me or being polite to the waitstaff. I tried to give the waiter an apologetic look for James' behavior as I placed my own order. The rest of our awkward dinner dragged by. Between courses, I tried asking James questions about his hobbies and life outside work, but he gave the most curt responses possible and never thought to turn the questions back on me. At one point, I said I needed to visit the ladies' room just as an excuse to take a break from the stilted conversation. When I returned from the bathroom a few minutes later, James asked if we were going to split the check or if I was planning to pay for my portion of the meal. I was stunned. This guy had asked me on a date, and now he was expecting me to pay for myself. I replied as politely as I could that I had assumed he was treating since he invited me to dinner. He rolled his eyes a bit but didn't push back on that. After we finally got the check taken care of, I said I was feeling tired and should probably just call it a night. James replied that he had actually made plans to meet some friends at a bar after this, so he was fine with cutting the evening short. He didn't even offer to walk me to my car, just an awkward wave goodbye as he headed off to continue his night elsewhere. I drove home feeling confused and frustrated. James had seemed so charming and thoughtful around the office, but on our date he was completely self-centered, spaced out, and just plain rude. Our roommate agreed I had dodged a bullet. It was better to learn now that James was not the great guy I had assumed. After the way he acted all night, I knew a second date was certainly off the table. The following week at work was slightly uncomfortable whenever I had to interact with James after our disastrous date, but he behaved normally, joking around with coworkers and being friendly as usual. I kept our conversations short and polite, but professional. The terrible first date did make me wary of trying to date other colleagues for a while after. But a few months later, when a cute new hire named Chris from sales asked me out, I decided to give it one more chance. We went to a casual pizza place, just in case. I was relieved that Chris was a complete gentleman who picked up the tab and walked me to my car after dinner. We hit it off and had now been happily dating for several months. I'm glad I didn't write off all office romances after my awkward run-in with James. With Chris, it has restored my faith that you really can find love, even at work. I was running a few minutes late as I rushed to get ready for my date that evening. We had met a couple weeks prior on a dating app and had really hit it off over messages. His name was Alex and he was cute, charming, and seemed totally normal. We both loved hiking, our dogs, and action movies. He had a great sense of humor that came across over text. When he asked me to meet up for coffee, I quickly said yes. I arrived at the cafe, slightly out of breath from speed walking the last few blocks in my heels. I scanned the warmly lit space and saw Alex already seated at a table in the corner. He looked just like his photos, tall and athletic with striking blue eyes and brown hair styled neatly. He smiled and waved me over. After quick introductions and apologies for my tardiness, we settled into light conversation about our weeks. Up close, Alex was even more handsome. He had a dazzling smile and focused completely on our chat. I found him easy to talk to. We discovered a shared passion for travel and similar taste in books. About 30 minutes in, I was really enjoying his company. He seemed genuinely interested in my random stories and laughed at my lame attempts at jokes. I started thinking maybe this would develop into something more. The initial awkwardness had faded and we were both leaning into the conversation. But then I noticed Alex's gaze drift over my shoulder as he scanned the bustling cafe. He had a strange, distracted look on his face. When I asked if everything was all right, he snapped back to our chat saying he thought he saw someone he knew. His eyes soon drifted again, his brow slightly furrowed. I sipped my latte, feeling perplexed. Before I could inquire again about his distracted state, the front door of the cafe suddenly flew open with a dramatic bang, jolting me in my seat. 3 intimidating police officers in bulletproof vests stormed in with guns drawn. Cries of shock echoed through the cafe. My heart started hammering as they marched directly towards us. In what felt like slow motion, the officers surrounded our table and yelled Alex's name. As he stood up, they grabbed his arms roughly, knocking his chair to the floor. One kicked his legs out and pushed him down onto his stomach. My mind spun in confusion and terror as they slapped handcuffs on his wrists. Face down on the tile, Alex craned his neck to look at me. "I'm so sorry. Please let me explain," he pleaded urgently. The cop handling him said gruffly, "Save it for the judge, dirtbag." In one swift movement, they hauled him to his feet and ushered him out the door to a waiting patrol car. I sat frozen in stunned silence, my life still clutched in my trembling hand. The other cafe patrons whispered to each other, equally bewildered. The barista locked the front door and turned over the open sign while I gathered my things in a fog. I tossed my half-finished drink in the trash on my way out, feeling shaken to my core. As I walked home, I struggled to process what had just happened. One second I was really enjoying my date, and the next he was being arrested right in front of me. What had Alex done? Who even was he? When I got back to my apartment, I immediately Googled his name. My jaw dropped as news articles came up chronicling his alleged crimes. He was wanted for robbery, forgery, and theft in multiple states. I found his mugshot on a post warning my neighborhood to be on the lookout. I was completely in shock. This guy I'd been chatting with for weeks and truly starting to like was apparently a dangerous fugitive. I felt so confused trying to reconcile the kind person I knew with this criminal stranger. Had it all been an act? Were there signs I had stupidly overlooked? In the following days, I replayed each moment of our date over and over. I felt angry and betrayed that he lied, and foolish for not realizing something was off sooner. But mostly, I just felt sheer luck that I hadn't gotten more attached before his double life was exposed. I took a long break from dating after that. When I eventually put myself back out there, I was much more cautious. I did thorough background checks on every match and only suggested meeting in very public spots. I remained open to each new person, but also trusted my instincts if anything seemed strange. That bizarre first date taught me that you truly don't know someone until you spend time together in person. I used to assume online matches were being authentic if we really clicked over chat. Now I know that's not always the case. Some people can conjure up completely fabricated personas and backstories. In a way, I'm grateful for that crazy experience. As horrifying as it was in the moment, it forced me to shed some foolishness about online dating. It also made for one wild story that I still can't believe I lived through. By far the most eventful first date I've ever been on. But at least the police caught Alex before he could deceive or hurt anyone else. All thanks to those heroic officers storming in just in the nick of time. Definitely a first date I will never, ever forget. I was really excited for my dinner date with Annie. We had met a few weeks ago at a friend's party and hit it off right away. She was cute, funny, and so easy to talk to. I asked her out pretty quickly and was thrilled when she said yes. We met up at a trendy new restaurant downtown. I got there a little early and grabbed a table by the window so we could people watch. When Annie arrived, she looked amazing. Totally natural, but still dressed up. I stood up to give her a quick hug. Her perfume smelled like vanilla, and I caught myself taking an extra breath as we pulled apart. The conversation flowed easily as we looked over the menus. Annie told me about her job as a graphic designer, her wacky coworkers, and her love of old horror movies. I found myself laughing constantly at her stories and quick wit. After we ordered, Annie asked about my interests. I told her about my passion for photography, especially nature and landscape shots. She seemed genuinely interested, asking which places were my favorite to photograph around here. I promised to take her to this hidden waterfall I had discovered last fall. It made for some amazing pictures. Dinner arrived, and we continued chatting effortlessly between bites. I really liked that Annie was such an engaging listener. She asked thoughtful follow-up questions and always seemed eager to learn more. The food was excellent, but I was enjoying the company even more. I insisted on picking up the check. As we left the restaurant, I impulsively reached for Annie's hand. She smiled and laced her fingers through mine. I hoped she couldn't tell just how fast my heart was suddenly beating. We wandered downtown for a bit, window shopping, and still talking nonstop. When Annie moved a bit in the cool night air, I draped my jacket over her shoulders. She snuggled into it, and my stomach did a little flip. As we headed back to my car, I told Annie I knew a scenic road home that I thought she'd enjoy. She seemed game for anything, so off we went. The drive started normally, but soon I veered onto a narrow side road I had never been down before. I passed it as a shortcut, but honestly I just wanted to prolong this time with Annie. At first it was charming, tree-lined back roads with interesting old houses and farms. But soon the streets narrowed and the homes disappeared. An uneasy feeling crept over me, but I brushed it off, determined to find something scenic for Annie. However, the further we drove, the more remote and isolated it became. Dense woods closed in on both sides, and the pavement turned bumpy and uneven. Annie grew quiet, checking her phone constantly. "That's weird, I had 0 bars out here," she murmured. I tried to play it cool, but anxiety was rising in my chest. This road seemed to go on forever with no intersections or signs. The headlights only illuminated so far ahead, and it was impossible to see where we were headed. I glanced over at Annie and could see the worry on her face. I had wanted to impress her with this shortcut, but now we were just lost and creeping deeper into unfamiliar darkness. My headlights eventually reflected a battered sign announcing a town ahead, but as we entered, it was completely deserted. No streetlights, no cars, nothing but vacant buildings all around us. Annie drew in a sharp breath, and I reached over to squeeze her hand, as much to comfort myself as her. The empty town stretched for several blocks before giving way to more winding wooded roads. The gas gauge suddenly caught my eye. We were running low after all this aimless driving. I gripped the wheel tighter, foot heavy on the gas pedal now. Just had to get somewhere, anywhere there were signs of life. The gas light flashed on right as we rounded a bend, and a ramshackle gas station emerged from the trees. My whole body sagged in relief, but as I screeched into the parking lot, it was clear this place had been abandoned for years. My heart sank once again. As the car sputtered to a stop, I felt utterly defeated. It turned to Annie, trying to apologize, to explain somehow, but her worried eyes said it all. I had put us in real danger all because I wanted to play tour guide. The night dragged on with still no signs of life around us. Without the engine running, the dark pressed in close and heavy. We huddled side by side in the car, too anxious to nap as the hours crawled by. Finally, a pair of headlights crested the horizon just before dawn. Annie and I both jumped from the car, waving frantically as an old pickup approached. The driver eyed us suspiciously, but I pleaded for help getting to a main road. The taciturn man told us to hop in the truck bed. The bumpy journey back was interminable, but never had a gas station looked so welcoming. As we all piled out, the man tried to refuse my money, but I insisted on buying him breakfast inside. Sitting at the counter over coffee, Annie gave me a wry, exhausted smile. "Not the ending I expected," she said quietly. I started to apologize again, but she touched my hand gently. "It's okay. We make it through the unexpected together, right?" My heart lifted hopefully. Maybe I hadn't ruined everything after all. I should have trusted my gut when my friend Jen called me raving about this great guy she just had to set me up with. She hadn't even met him herself, just connected with him online, which should have been red flag number 1. But Jen insisted Ryan was perfect for me. Smart, handsome, successful, the whole package. And she wouldn't let go, practically begging me to join her on a double date with Ryan and his friend who she was newly dating herself. After days of pestering, I finally caved and agreed to the date against my better judgment. Jen was thrilled and immediately gave the guys our numbers to make plans. Ryan texted me right away acting eager, asking lots of questions to get to know me. I tried to remind myself that could be a good sign, though the frequent communication still seemed a bit intense. When Friday came, I was a ball of nerves getting ready, half excited and half filled with dread. Jen came over early to pregame with some wine, gushing about how hot our dates would be. Her enthusiasm calmed me temporarily, even getting me laughing and chatting as we Ubered to the trendy restaurant downtown where we were meeting the guys. We arrived before them and grabbed 2 seats at the crowded bar. I was sipping my second glass of Chardonnay, feeling buzzed and relaxed when Jen suddenly squealed, "There they are." I followed her gaze to see 2 men in tailored suits entering the restaurant. They were attractive, though seemed a bit too slick for my taste. We made our way over for introductions. My date Ryan put on a charming smile and gave me a hug, which felt oddly intimate. The restaurant was packed, so we had to wait a while for our table, making conversation at the bar. After the initial small talk, Ryan and his friend Greg shifted to asking probing questions. Where did we live? Did we have roommates? What were our jobs and schedules like? Jen ate up the attention, but my unease grew. Finally, we were seated, the wine providing a nice buffer from the increasingly personal interrogation. Why did they care so much about the details of our lives? I noticed Ryan's eyes continuously scanning the crowded room, as if memorizing the entire layout and everyone in it. A couple times I caught Greg leaning over to whisper something to Ryan, exchanges Jen didn't seem to notice. The hair on my neck stood up when Greg left the table at one point, pretending to take a phone call while doing another full survey of the restaurant. Their creepy, secretive vibe killed my buzz. I needed to get out of there. Making some excuse about not feeling well, I asked Ryan if he could drive me home early. He looked annoyed but agreed. In his car, he drove recklessly, checking the mirror repeatedly. I directed him to drop me off a couple blocks from my actual apartment. When we pulled up at the random corner, I reached quickly for the door handle, ready to exit. Suddenly, his hand clamped down painfully on my wrist, making me freeze. "Not so fast," he growled. "You're not going anywhere." My heart dropped, realizing I was trapped with a dangerous predator. Adrenaline flooded my veins. Trying not to panic, I lied that my roommate was waiting inside and would call the cops if I didn't come in soon. Something flashed across his face. Doubt. Fear? After an endless moment, he released my wrist. "This isn't over," he snarled as I scrambled out of the car, pulse racing. I rushed into the safety of a random building, watching through the glass doors as Ryan's car idled at the corner for several minutes before slowly pulling away. I stayed hidden long after it disappeared from view, shaken to my core by the close call. Once home, I checked that my doors and windows were securely locked. I tried to call and text Jen to warn her about Greg, but got no response, leaving me worried. She finally called the next day. They had drugged both she and Greg's drinks and stolen her purse before ditching her at the restaurant. We filed a police report with as many details as we could remember. The cops informed us there was an organized crime ring working the city, using dating sites and singles events to target victims. I shuddered realizing how much worse our night could have gone. In the following weeks, I withdrew socially, no longer trusting blind dates or overly friendly strangers. Controlling my environment became vital to feeling safe, and I vowed never again to ignore those instincts telling me something was off. Eventually, news spread that Ryan and Greg got arrested in connection with a string of predatory crimes. Only then did I start to breathe easier. The nightmares faded along with the impulse to constantly check over my shoulder everywhere I went. I'll never know what exactly they had planned for me and Jen. Robbery, kidnapping, worse. Whatever their sick motives, falling for their dating ruse could have ruined our lives, or even ended them. Now I always meet any potential partners in very public places and sure friends know my whereabouts. No more taking chances on blind dates or trusting someone just because we have an online connection. I have to feel completely comfortable and safe before spending any time alone with a new person. And I will never disregard those internal warnings that something feels amiss, no matter the external pressure. My safety comes first, period. If only I had trusted that instinct from the very start, I could have avoided that whole terrifying ordeal. But at least a hard lesson was learned. Always listen to your gut. I arrived at the cafe a full 30 minutes early, my nerves getting the better of me. As I paced back and forth outside the entrance, I tried to calm my racing mind. I had been chatting online with Alex for over a month now, and we had really hit it off. Their profile pictures showed a gorgeous, smiling face with warm brown eyes and shiny chestnut hair flowing past their shoulders. Everything about our conversations just clicked. We shared so many of the same interests, from obscure indie bands to our favorite classic novels. When Alex asked me out on a date, I immediately said yes. I felt like I already knew them so well from our chats, and I couldn't wait to spend time together in person. But now, as the minutes ticked by, doubts started flooding my mind. What if we didn't have the same connection face to face? What if I made a bad impression? Finally, working up the courage, I stepped inside the cafe. My eyes scanned the busy room until I spotted Alex sitting by the window. My heart sank. The person staring back at me looked nothing like their photos. Their streamy, greasy hair was pulled back in a sloppy bun. Their oversized, wrinkled clothes hung loosely on their large frame. Behind their thick black glasses, their eyes were downcast and uneasy. I stood frozen for a moment, stunned. Maybe I had the wrong person. But no, as they hesitantly lifted their gaze, I could see a glimmer of recognition. This was definitely Alex. I felt completely blindsided. How could those beautiful photos possibly be of this person? Despite the shock coursing through me, I slowly made my way over. "Hi, Alex, it's so nice to finally meet you," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I sat down across from them, watching as they avoided eye contact, fidgeting with their hands. An excruciatingly awkward silence followed. I racked my brain for something, anything to talk about, but my thoughts were swirling. Alex kept stealing glances around the cafe, as if looking for an escape route. Their leg bounced rapidly under the table. I felt totally unsettled by their nervous energy. This date was already nothing like I imagined. After what felt like an eternity of stilted small talk, Alex took a deep breath and leaned in close, their voice barely above a whisper. "I need to tell you something. The truth is, those pictures you saw, that's not me. That's my friend Dylan. I was using their photos because I don't have the confidence to put up pictures of myself." I stared at them, stunned. It took a minute for their words to fully register. "Wait, you were pretending to be someone else this whole time? You lied to me?" I asked in disbelief. Alex dropped their gaze, tears welling up in their eyes. "I know, I'm so sorry. I just always hated the way I look. I never feel attractive enough or good enough. When I put Dylan's pictures up instead of mine, suddenly I was getting all this attention. People seemed interested in me for the first time. I got carried away with it. I never meant to hurt anyone." My shock was quickly turning to anger. I felt so betrayed and foolish. But looking at Alex's hunched shoulders and downcast eyes, I also couldn't help but feel a pang of sympathy. It was clear they struggled with painful insecurities. Still, it didn't excuse the deception. "I don't even know what to say right now," I admitted. "I feel so confused and misled. I thought I was getting to know the real you online, but now I don't even know who you are." Alex nodded, wiping their eyes. "You're right, what I did was so wrong. I was just terrified that if you saw the real me, you wouldn't give me a chance. I've dealt with rejection my whole life because of my looks. I thought using Dylan's pictures might help someone finally see past that, to like me for my personality. But I shouldn't have gone about it that way or continued the lies. Please, can you give me another chance? Seeing the raw pain in their eyes, my anger softening. Of course what they did was dishonest and unfair, but clearly they were dealing with deep-seated personal struggles. We sat in contemplative silence for a minute as I gathered my thoughts. Part of me wanted to just walk away from this messy situation, but another part was sympathetic to Alex's insecurities and wanted to give them the benefit of the doubt. I thought back on our online conversations. Those have felt so real and genuine. Maybe if I looked past the superficial lies, there could be something real between us. Okay, I'm willing to try again and get to know the real you, I finally said. But no more deception, understand? For this to work, you have to be completely honest with me from now on. Alex let out a huge sigh of relief. Of course, yes, I promise. Thank you so much for understanding. I won't let you down this time, I swear. They gave me a small, sheepish smile, and I felt myself smiling tentatively back. As we resumed our date, I could see Alex's nerves settling. They opened up more about their struggles with self-esteem and body image that had spanned years. The more we talked, the more their real personality shone through, the quick wit, thoughtfulness, and passion I had come to know online. I found myself truly enjoying their company when they dropped the facade. By the time we said goodbye, I felt cautiously optimistic. I knew rebuilding trust wouldn't happen overnight after the rocky start, but I was intrigued enough by the real Alex to give this a chance. As I walked home, I replayed the date in my mind. It had been equal parts messy, confusing, and eye-opening. But looking back, I felt grateful that they took the leap to finally reveal their true self. For now, I was willing to leave the past behind and see if we could build something real. I was so excited for my first date with Mark. We had been chatting on a dating app for a few weeks and really hit it off. He was handsome, funny, and we shared a lot of the same interests. When he finally asked me out to dinner, I gladly said yes. The day arrived and I took extra time getting ready, wanting to look perfect. I had on a new dress, spent longer than usual doing my hair and makeup, and even spritzed on my favorite perfume. This felt different than other first dates. I had a really good feeling about Mark. We planned to meet at a trendy Italian restaurant that just opened downtown. I arrived a little early and got us a table. I was sitting there with butterflies in my stomach when Mark walked in right on time. He looked just as cute as his pictures with bright blue eyes, dimples, and a warm smile. We hugged hello, and I felt excited by the chemistry between us. Things started off great. We ordered a bottle of wine and some appetizers to share. Mark asked me thoughtful questions and seemed genuinely interested as I talked about my job, my family back home, and life in the city. I took it as a good sign that he wanted to get to know the real me. I tried to reciprocate by asking him about his life too. That's when the conversation first turned to his ex-girlfriend. At first, it was just in passing. He referenced her when telling a story about his college days. No big deal, I thought. But then he kept steering things back to her. As we ate, Mark explained that they had dated for 3 years and lived together until recently. He spared no detail, telling me how they met at a party freshman year and instantly clicked. How they were inseparable all through college and moved to the city together after graduation. They got an apartment, adopted a dog, and seemed to be following the standard relationship timeline. Then Mark's tone shifted as he confessed that she abruptly ended things 6 months ago. He went into the messy details. How they had a big blow-up fight over wedding plans, since Mark was ready to propose and she didn't feel ready. How she moved out the very next day. How she went to remain close friends, but Mark struggled with that arrangement and the lack of closure. I tried changing topics, but clearly the breakup was still an open wound for Mark. He kept looping back to her, recounting play-by-plays of their fights, analyzing reasons why she might have grown distant. It all spilled out as we ate dinner on our date that was supposed to be about getting to know each other. Just as our entrees were being cleared and I was strategizing how to politely escape this uncomfortable situation, Mark's phone rang. His whole face lit up when he checked the caller ID. "Sorry, I have to take this. It's my ex," he said before stepping away from the table. I sat there in disbelief as I awkwardly sipped my wine. It was beyond inappropriate for Mark to take a personal call from his ex-girlfriend while we were mid-first date. He was gone for at least 10 minutes, leaving me to stew in this incredibly awkward moment. When Mark finally returned, he looked upset. He explained that his ex was having some emergency situation and really needed his help. He asked if we could cut the date short so he could rush over to her place and make sure she was okay. I was shocked. Not only was Mark clearly not over his ex, but he was ready to drop everything and run to her rescue at a moment's notice. It may as well have not even existed in that moment. I felt embarrassed, upset, and very glad I had not invested more time and feelings in this relationship. Mark could tell I was unhappy. As we walked out of the restaurant, he profusely apologized and asked if we could reschedule another date soon. But I had lost all interest after this fiasco and had seen all I needed to know about his emotional availability. I politely declined, thanked him for dinner, and drove home feeling like I dodged a major bullet. In retrospect, there were red flags from the start. The nonstop mentions of his ex should have tipped me off that Mark was still stuck in the past. But I was willing to give him the benefit of the doubt, and instead end up having the date unravel in a humiliating way. I learned to be more cautious moving forward, asking men on dating apps more questions about their past relationships before meeting up. I want to make sure any lingering feelings or attachments are fully in the past, so I don't end up an unwilling participant in someone else's drama. This experience taught me that first dates are about new beginnings and possibility, not rehashing old heartaches. I deserve someone's full attention and interest. Now I know what questions to ask and signs to look for, so I can avoid another ambush situation and instead find a partner truly ready for something real. My time is precious, so first dates need to focus on the future, not the past. It was a balmy Friday evening in the middle of summer, the kind that compelled people to get out of the house and embrace the promise of adventure. I had recently joined a popular dating app, optimistic about potentially meeting someone special. After a few lackluster matches, I finally connected with a woman named Samantha, whose witty banter and gorgeous photos immediately caught my eye. We exchanged flirty messages over the course of a week, discovering shared interests in indie music, foreign films, and avid traveling. When she suggested meeting for drinks that weekend, I readily agreed, eager to see if our online chemistry would translate in person. After fretting over my outfit choice, I settled on dark jeans, a fitted shirt, and my favorite pair of leather boots. I splashed on a spritz of musky cologne and neatly combed my hair, wanting to make a good first impression. The vibrant city buzzed with energy as I made my way downtown to the trendy speakeasy-style bar where we had agreed to meet. I wound through the crowded sidewalks filled with laughing groups of friends and couples strolling hand in hand. Turning the corner onto the tree-lined street, I immediately spotted the discreet awning marking the bar's entrance. Samantha was already seated at a cozy high-top table, intently scanning a cocktail menu. She looked up as I approached, flashing a warm smile that lit up her pretty face. We exchanged slightly awkward hello hugs before settling into our seats. A bartender promptly appeared to take our orders, an IPA for me and a glass of dry white wine for her. "It's so nice to finally meet you." Samantha effused. Up close, she was even more stunning than in her photos, with porcelain skin, piercing green eyes, and long, chestnut-colored hair framing her heart-shaped face. Conversation came easily as we discussed our shared interests over drinks. We laughed over embarrassing childhood stories and debated which films simply did not stand the test of time. I was captivated by her quick wit and the way she crinkled her nose when making a point. The hours slipped by unnoticed until last call was announced. Samantha turned to me, her eyes sparkling. "Want to check out the club down the street? I'm not ready for this night to end yet." Having soaked up one too many cocktails, I readily agreed, intrigued to see where the night would lead. We strolled down the block, the thick night air electric with promise. I relished the feeling of her soft hand clasped in mine. The club's thumping bass lines spilled onto the sidewalk, beckoning us inside. Once through the doors, the club enveloped us in sticky darkness, the press of bodies swaying on the dance floor. Samantha pulled me close as we moved to the rhythmic beats. Her hips swayed in sync with mine, our bodies fitting together effortlessly. I was enthralled by the intoxicating combination of pulsing music, strobe lights, and her perfume mingling with the scent of my skin. Several songs later, breathless and giddy, we drifted over to the neon-lit bar. Samantha ordered a round of shots, passing me one with a playful wink. The bitter liquid burned down my throat, mingling with the alcohol I had already consumed. The edges of the room began to blur as the night took on a surreal, dreamlike quality. Samantha leaned in close, her lips brushing my ear. "Let's get some fresh air." Taking my hand, she led me through the writhing sea of people. The cool night air hit my skin as we spilled out onto the sidewalk, a welcome contrast from the sweltering club interior. We ambled aimlessly, no destination in mind. I remember Samantha pulling me down a quiet side street, the booming club music fading into the distance. Her arms encircled my waist as she drew her body against mine. I inhaled her floral perfume, relishing the softness of her lips as they met my own. After that, the night becomes a disjointed blur of hazy images and muffled sounds. Brief memories surface, the distant wail of a siren, the gravelly rumble of a stranger's voice, the sensation of stumbling forward relying heavily on Samantha's sturdy frame, and then darkness. I awoke the next morning, sprawled haphazardly across my bed, still in my rumpled clothes from the night before. My head pounded angrily as I blinked against the harsh sunlight filtering through my bedroom window. Scattered thoughts of the previous night flickered through my mind like a disjointed film reel. As I fumbled to piece together some coherence, I became aware of a nagging sense that something was very wrong. I numbly patted my pockets, mine still foggy. Then it hit me. My wallet was gone. I bolted upright, ignoring the wave of nausea the abrupt movement triggered. Frantically, I searched my pockets again before scanning the surrounding area. No wallet, or any sign of my phone for that matter. The reality of the situation cut through my hangover like an icy wave. I had been robbed, possibly drugged, and left helpless and exposed by someone I had trusted. Humiliation and anger flooded my veins as I thought back on all the warning signs I had ignored. The push to keep drinking, the eagerness to leave public spaces, the gaps in my memory. I felt violated, foolish, and ashamed for allowing myself to become so enthralled by someone I barely knew. But more than that, I was disappointed in myself for overlooking basic precautions and red flags. I reported the incident to the authorities, but I knew chances were slim that I would recover my stolen items. In the following days, I wrestled with my bruised ego and a crisis of trust in my own judgment. But eventually the sting began to lessen, replaced by hard-won wisdom. I had learned a difficult but necessary lesson about protecting myself without sacrificing openness. My eyes were now wide open to potential risks, but my heart remained open as well, wiser and less clueless. Samantha and that surreal night would remain a cautionary tale or reminder to keep my wits about me. But I refused to become jaded or closed off. The encounter left its mark, but it would not define me. Moving forward, I knew from experience which red flags to heed, while still embracing the magic that comes from opening oneself up to new adventures. I still can't believe how my date last night turned into such a nightmare. When Brad initially asked me out on Hinge, I was excited. We'd chatted for a couple of weeks and he seemed really nice and genuine. We were both into hiking, trying new restaurants, and romantic comedies. He was cute in his photos, all smiles with bright blue eyes and dimples. I spent extra time getting ready, carefully curling my long brown hair and choosing a flattering burgundy dress. I finished off my outfit with small gold hoops and a spritz of my favorite perfume. As I did a final check in the mirror, I felt confident and optimistic for our date. We had agreed to meet at a trendy new farm-to-table restaurant downtown. I arrived right on time and snagged seats at the rustic wood bar. Soon after, Brad walked in looking just like his photos. He gave me a big smile and polite hug before sitting down. The conversation flowed easily as we sipped cocktails and got to know each other. I told him about my job as a graphic designer and my passion for watercolor painting on weekends. He said he worked in real estate and was training for his first marathon. After about 30 minutes, the hostess let us know our table was ready. Brad suggested we share some appetizers so we could try a variety of the restaurant's seasonal offerings. That seemed like a great idea, so I agreed happily. When our waiter came to take our order, Brad ordered way more food than I expected. He got us 2 of their most popular appetizers, an artisanal cheese plate and charcuterie board. For mains, he ordered 3 different entrees to share, a braised short rib dish, seared salmon, and truffle pasta. He also added on side orders of roasted Brussels sprouts, mac and cheese, and a kale salad. I was surprised at the sheer amount of food but didn't speak up. The appetizers arrived first and were beautifully plated. However, Brad dug into each one. eating the majority of the portions. I was lucky to get a few small bites in before the plates were clean. Next, the main courses arrived family style. Again, Brad served himself giant portions while encouraging me to try a little of everything. He polished off most of the dishes, leaving me only scraps. I have to admit the food was delicious, but I was getting pretty full with still more to come. After we finished the mains, Brad excitedly asked if I wanted to share some desserts too. By this point, I was stuffed but decided to get one dessert to split. Brad insisted we had to try 4 different items though, gushing about how amazing the bourbon pecan pie, chocolate lava cake, cheesecake, and creme brulee all sounded. I reluctantly agreed, not wanting to ruin his fun. When the enormous dessert tray hit our table, Brad's eyes lit up with delight. He dove into the chocolate lava cake first, devouring the whole thing in minutes. Next, he moved on to the bourbon pecan pie, scraping up every last crumb with his fork. I managed to get a few small bites of the cheesecake and creme brulee in before admitting I was done. Brad, however, had no problem finishing the remainder by himself. Finally, the waiter dropped off the bill. As soon as he set it down, Brad made a big dramatic show of patting his pockets and looking distressed. He then very reluctantly admitted he didn't bring his wallet tonight and had no way to pay. With profuse apologies, he asked if I could please cover the bill, promising he would pay me back ASAP. I was shocked and furious. Given the insane amount of food Brad had ordered and devoured, the bill was close to $200. I had assumed we would be splitting the costs of our reasonably priced meals and had brought only about $150 cash on me. The rest would have to go on a credit card now. Brad kept gushing apologies and gratitude, effusively thanking me for bailing him out. He promised to repay every cent the next day and said he felt so embarrassed about forgetting his wallet. I quickly paid the bill and tipped so we could get out of there. As we walked to our cars, Brad kept trying to hold my hand and pull me closer while I stayed stiff, crossing my arms tightly across my chest. Oblivious, he went on about how he had such an amazing time and couldn't wait to go out again soon. I drove home fuming, cursing myself for being so foolish. $200 wasted on this first date, on food I'd barely even tasted. And now I had to awkwardly follow up with this jerk to get my money back. What a disaster. The worst part came the next day when I texted Brad for my money. He responded saying he had no recollection of forgetting his wallet or asking me to pay. Claimed the date had gone perfectly with no issues, and he paid the tab in full, no problem. I was flabbergasted. I carefully explained the entire humiliating wallet situation again. Still, he maintained his innocence, acting confused. When I made it clear I expected to be paid back immediately, he suddenly stopped responding altogether. I've tried calling multiple times too, but it keeps going straight to voicemail. I'm so angry at myself for letting this happen. This guy completely tricked me into paying for his outrageously expensive meal and is now refusing to pay me back or even acknowledge it happened. I've learned my lesson the hard way now about first dates with strangers. From now on, it's simple coffee or walk in the park meetups only, keeping my purse tucked safely away the whole time, and certainly no more big food and drink spreads. I never imagined a date could go so horribly wrong, but now I know you truly can't judge a book by its cover. Even nice guys may just be out for a free meal. What an expensive disaster.
Thanks for listening in. If you like these stories and want to hear more, then please subscribe and like and support this new channel. We have more stories for you to listen to.